as interim general manager. Sources telling TSN that negotiation continued into this morning, and ultimately, as Cliff Fletcher points out, what they settled on was a 19-month arrangement which almost mirrors what he had remaining in terms of his contract with the Phoenix Coyotes. So depending the term on interim basis here, he will be the general manager for the Toronto Maple Leafs. If and when they find the right candidate, the president and general manager, to take over those duties, he will then slide into a consulting position. But that negotiation continued into this morning, and John Ferguson didn't learn of his fate until approximately 10:30, 11 o'clock Eastern.
Okay, Darren Dreger, let's go to our other hockey insider, Bob McKenzie now. Bob, I want to get your opinion on the hiring of Cliff Fletcher, and also his mandate, and whatever term he has, actually is the one who's calling the shots.
Well, absolutely, Rod. First, I think it's important to point out, and it was obviously made evident at the news conference, Cliff Fletcher will not be a candidate for the full-time general manager's job. He's strictly in that caretaker role. And from my understanding, that was one of the hurdles that they had to overcome at the board level, that while Richard Peddie wanted to bring in Cliff Fletcher as the interim GM, there was a block within the board of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. They're absolutely adamant it was fine to bring Cliff in to be the interim guy, but at no time did they want him to be able to throw his hat into the ring and make himself a candidate for that full-time job. So it's strictly a caretaker role, strictly a custodian role, as Darren points out, for 19 months. That 19th month figure, what we're looking at is anywhere from 4 to 6 months of actual on-the-job duty as the interim GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The rest of it, they call it a consultant. What it really is, it's a payday. It is the financial consequences of Cliff Fletcher being under contract to the Phoenix Coyotes and making sure that he's covered off financially and that he's not ending up taking this job at a cost to himself. So those were the things that jumped out at me in terms of that. As for the job ahead, Cliff Fletcher's got a lot of work to be done. And if there's only one thing that Cliff Fletcher does between now and the end of this regular season, and certainly the trade deadline in less than 4 weeks, it would be to convince Matt Sundin to waive his no-trade clause. At this point in time, Sundin is very hesitant to do that. You heard Cliff Fletcher talk about it. He said he's driving the engine right now. That means he's got a no-trade clause. He doesn't have to go anywhere if he doesn't want to, but it's in the best interest of the Maple Leafs to trade Matt Sundin. Fletcher's #1 priority will be to convince Matt Sundin of the wisdom of that, and if he wants to come back and sign in Toronto in the summer, that's fine and dandy. But the Leafs desperately need to put together a major package for Matt Sundin that is going to leave the cupboard full for the next general manager when he arrives.
All right, Bob, and what's so interesting about that, I find, Darren, as well, that the last time Cliff Fletcher was faced with trading really the face of the franchise was Wendell Clark in 1994. Yeah. I suppose we'll trade Doug Gilmour later on, but that was the one to get Matt Sundin from the Quebec Nordique, and it's funny how full circle things could come if he does wind up actually trading Matt Sundin. So this is 19 months. Obviously, it sort of breaks down, you'd have to think, that Cliff Fletcher gets them through the balance of this season. He's on board for another season, but you'd have to assume a new general manager is hired before the 08-09 season. Let's assume that. Who are the logical candidates to take over?
Well, I think you have to look at the enormity of this position now, and it's not just the position of general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And as was reported several weeks ago, Richard Peddie essentially acknowledging that it was a mistake to hire a rookie general manager in John Ferguson because of how taxing the position actually is. Well, this is now president and general manager, and a search committee has been assembled. Richard Peddie is part of that. Gordon Kirk, a well-known lawyer in the Toronto area, is also part of that group. I think that this is a small group of individuals. And keep in mind, Cliff Fletcher also pointed out the criteria needed. He said, you know, this individual has to have shown a successful record, track record of winning in the National Hockey League, and that breeds success coming over. Who are we talking about here? Well, Brian Burke continues to engage in negotiations with the Samueli family. He wants to remain in Anaheim as the Ducks president and general manager, but you have to believe that Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, if they haven't already, they will isolate Brian Burke as a pure uber boss. Well, another name that might fit into that category is Jim Rutherford of the Carolina Hurricanes. And what it speaks to, Rod, is again the track record here, the success. Both these individuals have been around the game. They've been involved in the game of hockey for quite some time, and they've both won Stanley Cup championships. But neither one of those men is coming in without pure autonomy, and Peddie made that clear, that not only Cliff Fletcher, but the man coming in will have that autonomy. And if this individual is hired, as you know, the interest is showing, as both president and general manager, then that speaks to Richard Peddie not necessarily being involved in hockey matters any further.
Okay, Bob McKenzie, any thoughts on the next GM and I want to also ask you about the so-called Colangelo deal, because Scotty Bowman had said that's what he was looking for last summer before Richard Peddie said, no, we're not actually going in that direction. But your thoughts on who the next general manager could be?
Well, the Colangelo deal, for all intents and purposes, just so people know, people believe Colangelo is being paid somewhere between $2 million and $4 million per year, which is significantly more than what most general managers make in the National Hockey League. And I think Scotty was implying that if he was going to come to Toronto and take over in that role, that he would want to be paid like Brian Colangelo and also have Colangelo's autonomy. Now, Richard Peddie did allude to the autonomy, and I think Richard Peddie is right to some degree on one thing. That is, the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Board, including Peddie, did not interfere with John Ferguson on a daily basis and tie his hands time and time again. But there are certain times in place in this organization where there is a sense that that extra step needs to be taken. And I believe that any general manager or president and general manager that comes in, and Darren pointed out, when you add the title of president to it, I don't know where Richard Peddie fits in. He'll continue to be chief operating officer, but right now he's the president. So what they're doing is maybe eliminating a bit of a layer there. In any case, whoever comes in is going to say that he wants to report directly to the board, that he wants to have that autonomy. Now, Darren started listing the names. Brian Burke is an obvious candidate. Jim Rutherford from the Carolina Hurricanes has won a Stanley Cup. He's been in a Stanley Cup twice in the last 5 or 6 years. He will be, even though he's still under contract with the Carolina Hurricanes, he will be mentioned as a candidate. Kenny Holland, I believe the Leafs asked for permission to talk to Mike Ilitch and the Detroit Red Wings earlier this season about Kenny Holland. Permission denied. Kenny Holland suddenly got a title change, a bump up in his salary, and that tells you what you need to know there. But having said that, Kenny Holland, Brian Burke, and Jim Rutherford will be identified as the primary 3 existing general managers in the National Hockey League because they have won Stanley Cups, because they do have winning records in winning organizations. And if you wanted to throw Bob Gainey and Lou Lamoriello in there, you might as well start putting the list together of all the viable candidates in terms of currently employed, having won a Stanley Cup, and with winning organizations. Beyond that, there are all sorts of people that are recently out of work. Doug McLean, Doug Armstrong, John Muckler, Bob Clark, Craig Patrick. Some of those guys in the profile that Richard Peddie listed fit to varying degrees, so that's something to keep an eye on. It doesn't sound as if we're going to get into a situation where they would possibly go to somebody who does not have NHL general manager experience. So names like Bob Nicholson, Steve Yzerman, Coley Campbell would perhaps be on the list of outsiders looking in. And of course, then there's the Scotty Bowman factor, which is always going to be there.
All right, Bob McKenzie. And by the way, Richard Peddie saying looking for a long-term builder and short-term fixer, which would appear that they would work against each other. Cliff Fletcher, of course, the short-term fixer for now.